Hi, good evening. Hi, Hema. Hello. Hi, Jasmine Kaur. Hi. Nandini. Sent you a DM. Would love to connect with you, of course. Didn't we discuss this the last time as well? I'm so sorry. Did you send it to Ala or did you send it to my personal ID? Akila. Oh, the team from Freshlings is here. Dr. Uma is here as well. Oh, hi. Hi, Preeta, Suhail, the Freshlings. Enjoying my batch of basil, amranth. Yummy. Hi, Revati. Hi, Shrikant, Ashwati. Hi, namaste. I am conversation. Hi, Monisha. Hi, good evening, doctor.
Hi, Lakila. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
I'm
How are you
audible.
doing?
Doing well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I love the color you're wearing, doctor. Nice and purple.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Need to
So, of
brighten
course,
up everything in this situation. So,
whatever it takes to do that.
absolutely.
Lovely. Doctor, firstly, I'm going to thank you immensely for taking time off to be with us today, tonight, on a Sunday night. Thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
Secondly, I want to give a big shout out to the medical fraternity and to the healthcare workers who've been doing fantastic work during this very, very trying times. I'm sure everyone will agree. So thank you so much for, doing whatever you're doing. It's amazing work and allowing us all to be safe and secure in the comfort of our homes and being sure that we're going to be looked after. That's great. Thirdly, I'm going to start off this conversation with one of my favorite quotes by Maya Angelou, which is, I'm grateful to be a woman. I must have done something great in another life. So just as we were thinking about the many phases of womanhood, and I was kind of preparing my questionnaire, I thought about how, extremely proud and grateful I feel about being a woman and for the gender that we belong to, and for all
Absolutely.
the
Absolutely.
strength of character and resilience that we show in negotiating each and every phase that we go through. So while curating this series called Sustenance of Self and Society, we definitely wanted to bring on board someone from the medical fraternity and get insights on how a woman dancer really navigates through these many phases. And almost, I didn't even have to think too hard. Almost instantly, I knew that we wanted to have you on board. And thank you so much for agreeing to do this on a Sunday night. I'm going to formally introduce you, Doctor, to some of the people who perhaps don't know you well. Dr.
Okay.
Uma is an obstetrician gynecologist at Chennai-based Sitapati Clinic and Hospital. She aims to provide good evidence-based care with a human connect. She's also very keen on increasing health awareness in women so they make sensible and deliberate health choices. She's also the chairperson for South India RCOG International Representative Committee. But Dr. Uma, for those who don't know, is a very multifaceted person. She's a very good visual artist, and I love to watch like what she doodles and draws and paints. I know that she also has a love for nature. I know that she has a very keen ear for the performing arts. And off late, I've realized, I knew she was a foodie, but off late, I'm seeing her cook and share these amazing photographs using all the greens from the Freshlings. That's also incidentally logged into this conversation. So thank you, Dr. Uma,
Thank you,
for suggesting
Akila.
this.
Yeah. No, I must
Doctor,
say there is probably a little bit of bias in Akila's generous introduction because we go back quite a long way.
of
Yeah,
course.
thank you very much. Yeah.
Most welcome. Doctor, I'm going to firstly start with the period. Okay? Because we're going to be discussing the different phases of womanhood, and let's start with the period, menstruation. Talk to us really about, and we're looking at this primarily in the context of a woman dancer. So
Okay.
do talk to us firstly about what are the physiological and emotional changes that a woman's body undergoes, post menstruation, and does it come in the way of her pursuing dance?
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a fairly common doubt or question that a lot of youngsters, maybe a lot of mothers may have too, when the children, young girls initiate dancing. So dancing and actually any form of exercise can be done safely during a period. There isn't any reason why you should not dance or should not exercise during a period. But of course, there are, women or young girls who have very painful, very heavy periods, and in those situations they may not be able to. So initially, so then I think you just have to be sensible and listen to your body. But barring that, it is quite okay to exercise during your period. Of course, the other thing is that there will be some changes in the woman's body around the period, because we know that we have two hormones that act on us. One is estrogen and one is progesterone. And just before the period, the progesterone levels are high and then they tend to drop. So there is, for some people, a little bit of water retention. There may be a slight change in weight. There can be a slight impact of mood, though not in the initial parts, but later on through adolescence and, in your maybe in the 30s even. Sometimes the period cycle predisposes you to, mood changes or premenstrual stress. So navigating all of that can become an issue unless the woman is aware that, okay, this is happening for a reason and I can handle it and put things in place to factor that in when you're thinking of dancing, or certainly the challenges may be a little bit more if you're performing, but those are things that we need to factor in. The one other point I want to make in relation to dance and period is, very often if you're dancing regularly and you're also then doing other forms of exercise that would contribute to you as a dancer, the fact that you're exercising regularly itself will positively impact the period. So you could actually find that it's helpful to regularize the period. Over time, it will reduce pain. And it can affect positively the period cycle.
Right. Doctor, I also want to ask you about your, take on the menstrual cup. In one of the episode 1 of Sustenance, we had Prashanti Ganesh of Strength System, and she talked a lot about the menstrual cup. And I thought I would ask you, about your viewpoints. Like, she talked about how, like, the menstrual cup can be very liberating for women. The whole idea was how it can be freeing. What is your take on that, Doctor?
So the menstrual cup certainly is safe. That's the first thing. A lot of people have concerns about its safety. It is safe. It is liberating in a sense that you don't have to worry so much about flooding or you could, if you have very heavy flow, keep additionally a pad. The only issue with the cup is that you have to get comfortable with inserting it and removing it. And for younger, for some younger girls and younger women, they may not feel comfortable doing that. That's the only issue. But otherwise, it's quite safe to use.
Right. Doctor, my next question was about the premenstrual syndrome. I know that you mentioned that, but I want to ask you about how, I've had like these young girls who interned with me who are like 17 and 18, and they have like dance classes like literally almost on an everyday basis, right? And so they're probably dancing through their period, and so how does one really tackle PMS? Should somebody be taking medicines, or should they be changing their nutrition a little bit here and there? Like, how does it work? What is your take on that?
So well, everybody doesn't have PMS, thankfully.
Thank God.
The severity of PMS varies. You can have very mild, just feeling a little bit about life kind of thing, to significantly feeling teary, having panic attacks, getting angry, agitated. So obviously, if you're on that end of the spectrum, you will probably need medication for also other methods of trying to cope with the hormonal changes that are happening. So some
Right.
change in lifestyle and diet will help. And
Will help.
actually regular exercise will help. So
Will
if you
itself.
look at
Okay.
dancing as a form of exercise, and which is something that also gives you a lot of pleasure, and that will in a way also have a calming effect. So
Right.
but obviously if you're somebody who has significant premenstrual tension,
Right.
you may not be able to engage and dance and things like that on those days.
Sure.
And
Right.
if you're not able to then do your best, that can become a negative spiral. So if somebody is
Right.
having those kind of symptoms, they need to seek help,
Then
because
for
there's
sure.
nothing wrong in seeking help. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you
Dr.
would seek
Divya,
help if you had very heavy periods, right? So, or very
the
painful
same.
periods. So, in the same way, you need to do that.
Right. Dr. Divya Ravi, another dancer from the UK,
Yeah,
because we're talking about this, asks, is there any way to tackle the bloating
bloating and
and the heaviness
heaviness.
that one often that accompanies PMS?
Yeah. And despite exercise and dancing,
Exercise,
she
yeah.
says there is a problem for a few of us. So this happens, Divya, usually if there is if you're very sensitive to the progesterone levels, that again, progesterone is the main reason why this happens. So the water retention is there. Sometimes diet changes help. If you cut down the carbohydrate, cut down the caffeine, uh, that would help. There
Caffeine,
are
yeah.
some, yeah. But if it is significantly bothersome, we may have to think of medication. But usually it's just a few days. So
Yeah.
if you're able to tide over it, then um, you don't need to go on medication. But sometimes we may need to give hormonal, so that it's actually the fluctuation in the hormone level. So if we can keep it consistent, then the PMS symptoms will come down.
Right. Doctor, since we are talking about PMS, Revati from, I think, Revati from Canada, right, would be helpful to have tips to handle breastfeeding aversion during PMS. Aversion to
That's a
breastfeeding during
very
PMS.
interesting question. I am not sure uh, how, I have not actually come across somebody who actually has specifically breastfeeding aversion during PMS. I guess most of the time, because at least in the initial phase of lactation, you're not having your periods, so you're PMS free. But if you're somebody who's extending breastfeeding for maybe over a year or so, when your periods start resuming, it could be an issue. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm happy to check it out and get back to her.
Sure, sure, doctor. So my next question was really about the role of supplements, doctor. Of late, we talk a lot about strength training. We're talking about muscle health. We're talking about bone health. And especially for dancers, would you be able to comment on how does one start taking care of all of this when they're much younger? And also, what is the role of supplements? Like, should we be taking supplementing, like, with some calcium, magnesium, all of which is just now doing the rounds, so to speak?
So I'm not okay. So let's start with the first part of your question. I think it's important to begin focusing on your strength and bone health and everything when we are young. So even when our young girls, around puberty, that's the age where
Okay.
bone is actually being built. So you
Okay.
need to ensure that you have good bone health early. Only
Early.
then, later on in life, in the 50s, when you're menopausal and you're worried about osteoporosis, I like to say it's like, having money in a bank. Unless you put in the money, later on you won't have anything to draw on. So the strength, the building
Doctor,
happens
I want to
early.
go back. I want to go back. I want to rewind now.
Okay. All of us do, right? Yeah. Tell me
Oh,
about it. So, and I think
sorry.
Sheila's logged on, and Sheila'll be, laughing to herself,
I
because
know.
we, she's somebody who's a very strong proponent of all of this. But I think,
I
yes.
know.
So
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you're
yeah.
learning to dance, and if you, especially if you're learning to dance, because there is a fair amount of strain on your muscle and your joints. It is very, very important, I think, to also focus on your flexibility and your strength and do other things, be it yoga or be it strength training, and all of that will help build bone and help you later on. See, we are talking about somebody who's committing to dance for their lifetime, basically, right? Whether they're performing or not is a different issue. They need to be able to dance for themselves. So if you're in your mid 50s or late 40s, obviously there are going to be changes compared, especially because you're a woman. A man doesn't have to go through all the physiological changes in life that a woman goes through. And therefore, if you're a woman and a dancer, you need to invest that much more early on so that you've built and you have good strength and good balance and everything to sustain your dancing.
Right.
Yeah. So supplements, I don't think are necessary early on. If you're having a good balanced diet and you're having enough calcium and your enough nutrition in your diet, enough vegetables, enough protein, you don't need supplements early on. But later on in life, you do need to supplement the calcium, definitely.
Doctor, there was a question from the mother of a girl who's nearing puberty, and she'd like to know, is there anything we need to do to prepare her body in terms of her diet?
Yeah. So I think a well-balanced diet, teaching her to make the appropriate food choices, ensuring there's enough intake of definitely of calcium because they're gaining height. And so bone, again, I'm stressing the point because that early, if you have to ensure there's good calcium, good protein. And if they are, make sure there is enough iron as well, because we see a lot of anemia as well in our young girls and women. So we need, and the way we cook our greens, we all believe, oh, we are having kheera every day, so that's not enough supplement of iron because we just cook everything out of the kheera the way we make it sometimes. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Doctor, I want to talk to you next about, the next shift, so to speak, that happens with childbirth, how the body changes. Could we firstly speak about planning a pregnancy itself? I know that a lot of dancers think about this because sometimes it's like setting aside 2 years in the prime of your, dancing career, so to speak. So I do know that, I've had conversations with some of them and some of their mothers have talked to me about how they're like, so talk to us about planning pregnancy as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a difficult choice, no, for any woman in any career. There's sometimes there never is a right time. You just have to, if that needs to be done, you just have to get on with it. But certainly you need to plan because just as with women in the IT field who sometimes have to go on a project, they come and say, we are unprepared for this pregnancy. It just happened accidentally. Can we have a termination? I have had artists who come in with the same query as well. So, but we have very, very effective forms of contraception. And I would like to urge everybody to think about it because termination is not a contraceptive option. It is there, it is safe. Of course, we can provide that service. But using a contraceptive and going on a low dose birth control pill for a short period of time, maybe 2-3 years even, is quite safe. And I know a lot of dancers worry about the pill because they worry about water retention, weight gain.
But on the low, stuff, right?
But on the low dose pill, those are negligible. So provided there are no other risk factors, that's probably one of the safest contraceptive options because you have it in your control, and also it regularizes the period, it cuts the bleeding, and it reduces pain. So all these are other positive impacts of the pill. So certainly you need to plan. And other things that we like to advise pre-pregnancy are to take enough folic acid to ensure that overall you're in a healthy, health in a healthy space, both in terms of your weight and ensure that you don't have other problems like thyroid or sugar and all of that before you embark on a pregnancy.
Right. Um, Doctor, there's a question about, I just want to kind of address the questions immediately because sometimes,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
just
we
get.
forget, yeah.
Yeah, there's Vidya
Bone health
Lakshmi would
and
like to know.
stamina, I think we are going to address later, yeah?
Yeah.
There's one more.
Somebody asks about taking calcium supplements makes stone formation in gallbladder and other organs. Is this true, doctor?
Yeah, it's not true. It's not true. Yes, you can get calcium stones in the kidney. Definitely not in the gallbladder. Kidney stones sometimes are because of calcium, but not because of the calcium that you take. So when we discuss menopause, we can come back to that, Akila.
Right. All right. Okay, doctor. So, typically, doctor, when a woman has a child, like, you've, had so many dancers who've been your clients and stuff. So typically they set aside what, like it takes them like 1.5 to 2 years to bounce back, to get back to
I
dancing
think
full
it
time.
I think it would vary from dancer to dancer.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that, yeah, I would imagine a year at least because of, you can get back to dancing in a couple of months if you need to. I mean, you can,
Right.
because if it's especially if it's a normal delivery, in 6 weeks you can get back to exercise. Even if it is a section, in 8 weeks you can get back to exercise and
That's right.
slowly start. But it's the question of, there is a baby, there is a feeding schedule, there is a
So
lot of
much.
emotional and physical change that is going on. So how do you balance it out? And
Right.
so a lot of women have asked me, when do I get back to dance? And I say, you can get back to dancing.
Right.
You can do a class, but seriously, if it is performance level dancing, definitely it will take, I think, a year.
A year.
I
Okay.
mean,
Um,
there may be people who have done it earlier, but I would think a year in your head is a good time. If
is
it
what you need to
happens
kind of.
earlier, it's better.
Okay. Doctor, I also want to talk to you about postpartum depression. How does one, also for a dancer, the body is like literally like their tool, right? Their instrument. So, in some sense, after childbirth, the body definitely undertakes a beating or undergoes a certain change. What would you like to say about that? And emotionally, would you like to also talk about postpartum and how a dancer could, cope with that?
I'm not sure if there's any reason for the postpartum period to be specifically different for a dancer from the mood perspective. I mean, it's not as if
Correct.
there is more or less postpartum depression
For
because you are a dancer compared to any other woman.
right.
Anyone can go into postpartum depression. It's very common to feel a little low for the first couple of weeks, but if you are very teary, if you're having significant mood changes after more than 2 weeks after childbirth, then that is postpartum depression. You need to seek help.
Okay. Okay.
Sometimes they are able to overcome it with counseling. Sometimes medication is necessary. It need not be depression all the time. It can be anxiety. For some, it's a kind of a obsessive engagement with the child. They may be very, very worried and nobody else can take care of the baby except them. So they become very obsessive. Some become extremely detached and feel they have no emotion. So these can happen to any woman. The
Correct.
fact is to be aware that if this is happening, that it is not something wrong with you. This is like a
What should be
condition that needs
right
addressing.
addressed?
Yeah.
Doctor, the reason I asked you also was because in today's context there is so much also like stimulation, and there's like everybody's watching social media. It's also a way more competitive world than before. So I'm also curious to understand, like, therefore, for a dancer, in some sense, you've got you've had a child, your body has changed, you're probably like not you're not getting that many concert opportunities. So how does one also tackle those kind of emotional issues that may sort of result from childbirth in that sense?
See, I think definitely these two phases, one is around childbirth, one is around menopause. There are
Correct.
significant changes that will happen to a woman's body. We can't get away from it. but we can accept it and then prepare ourselves for it. So it's all about expectation. Obviously, you can't expect to within 3 months of having a baby be expect to look or perform or even physically
Yeah.
get into the shape that you were before. It
Yeah.
also depends on how good a shape you were earlier. Did you continue to,
To be able
to be able to do things during
bounce back.
pregnancy, or did you just let yourself go? Because there's no
Correct.
reason to stop during pregnancy if you're used to doing something all along. You reduce the
Right.
intensity and things like that. So, so it's I think it's setting it's a this it that becomes more a mental exercise. What are you comfortable with? You know, you
Right.
have chosen to do this for a reason. So you need to give this time and then be confident that you'll be able to get back. Because so many
Right.
women have gone through it.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think
That's what I was
it's
asking you,
more
doctor.
in
Would
the
you head, right? So would you recommend that they seek some kind of like, does Sitapati have a counseling cell where they could meet like a counselor who could kind of, help them through this?
no, so if it is significantly affecting them, yes, I think the counseling is a something that will certainly help. In the last year and a half, we do have a counselor, and that because we realized that a lot of women need that, and even though some of us tend to talk, but we don't have the time or the expertise if there's a genuine problem to
Correct.
invest in that kind of
Yeah.
engagement. In so yes, that is something that they can seek. It doesn't always mean medication. Sometimes women are scared to go because are they going to give us tablets? Will they brand us as something or the other? But it's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
natural to have these kind of doubts. Sometimes you may worry, will I ever be able to do what I did before? So
Right.
those
Yeah.
kind of things, sometimes it's helpful to have counseling.
Right. Doctor, there's a
There's
question about postpartum hair fall. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. So actually, there's a lot of people are calling now, even now during this pandemic, and saying I'm having a lot of hair fall.
Hair fall.
So I think, no,
I
but
have no hair,
seriously,
doctor.
that's because you're working on different shows every day, at 3 times
I
a
know.
day sometimes. I think it's all that stress. But just jokes apart, hair fall is usually like a cycle, just as your hair also grows and falls. So sometimes it just happens to coincide with these significant events. Some
Okay.
women lose weight during pregnancy, some during hair fall. Ensure that your hemoglobin is good, you have enough protein, and enough nutrition in your diet, and good hair care. Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's typically postpartum, usually it will settle down.
Okay. Doctor, we could probably head to menopause now and
Yeah,
then maybe take questions that were related to
sure.
menopause. What are typically the changes that a woman's body undergoes, and how does one start recognizing that one is headed to menopause?
So the average age of menopause is around 50. And I'm
50.
saying that because a lot of women in their early 40s, mid 40s, if a period is delayed or becomes irregular, they just assume it's menopause. We tend to blame a lot of things on menopause. Yes, a lot of things happen around menopause, but everything is not, cannot
Not
be
just
put under
because of.
that basket. So around 50, most of the time, periods will not abruptly stop. It will be a change in pattern, and so the period itself stopping is just one very clear indication of menopause. But there are other changes that happen. There can be hot flushes, what we call vasomotor symptoms. You may suddenly feel very, very hot, like a flush going through you. There may be increased sweating, sleep may be disturbed. But more significantly, because we're talking about dancing, there is a change in your metabolism that happens. So you may be doing the same amount of training and exercise, you may be eating the same food, but because there is a difference in the balance of estrogen and the amount of male hormone that is also produced in the body, there is a difference in the there is a slowing of the metabolic rate, there is a redistribution of fat, and therefore your body, how much ever you try, sometimes you may feel that there is weight gain, and there is a shift in the body fat that can happen. So this is something that women have to pay attention to, and do the right things in terms of diet and exercise in order to counter this change in the metabolic rate, that is metabolism, that's happening.
Doctor, how does this come in the way of a dancer's life? I'm sure you've worked with, dancers who've probably had menopause. And how does this actually, could you talk to us a little bit about how does it come in the way of?
So definitely, if there is a weight fluctuation, it affects them, because it affects their movement, the way they handle their body changes. So to you and me, it may be 1 kilo, 1.5 kilos, not a big deal, but for them, it may make a big difference also. And certainly, if there is disturbance in sleep, if there's flushes, if you don't want that to happen when you're taking a class or whatever. So and a lot of them, some of them feel very exhausted. There is a little bit of bloating. There can be some bone pain, body pain. So all of this, with appropriate supplements, with changes, a lot of it is lifestyle. So you just need to. It's very difficult sometimes to tell someone who's a very active dancer that you need to modify your routine, or you have to include something else to make a change, because unfortunately with menopause, some changes are bound to happen and you have to overcome it.
Right. That's what actually I was going to ask you, doctor, from a communication perspective, like what you'd probably tell me if I were to, when I would have my menopause, how different would it be for you when you communicate with a dancer? I want to understand, therefore, because like you rightly said, for us, it's just like, okay, I just gained a kilo or something and maybe, whatever. But how do you tailor communication to understand? Because for them, that is like so crucial, right? Being able to move.
Yeah, so firstly, it depends. So because menopause is not the same for everybody. So for some, there may be an issue with weight. For some, it may be a lot of skin dryness. For some, it may just be that they're not sleeping well and their mood is affected. So we have to identify what is actually affecting them, and then kind of most of the time it's only hand holding and saying that this is a phase and it will pass, and giving some tips that they can do to help themselves perform better.
Right. Doctor, I wanted to ask you also, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, there was a question about hot flushes post delivery along with sweating a day before my period. Why is that so?
Actually, post delivery feeling flushed could be many reasons. It need not be the same hormonal reason that happens in menopause, because there is, if you're breastfeeding, there are other hormones in place. You may not be sleeping that well. There may be a little bit of dehydration if you've not had enough fluids to drink. So all of that could be the reason for feeling flushed after delivery. It may not be the same reason why it happens in menopause.
Okay. Doctor, there was one more question about need to know fluctuations in periods after 40. What one needs to do to make it regular?
Yeah. So some degree of change in the period pattern can happen after 40 in terms of the cycle. Sometimes if you have if it's coming within like 35 days, 40 days, and it's not very heavy, you can leave it alone. Provided there is contraception and you're not worried about the fact that you may, unexpectedly be pregnant. That's the only precaution to take when your periods become irregular because you can't quite use the cycle and say these are fertile days and these are
Yeah.
not. And sometimes that's when women let their guard down. That's why I'm saying it specifically. Of course, there are
Right.
situations when the bleeding can be heavy and you don't just assume it's menopause. It could be fibroids, it could be something else that is happening. And so there you need to actually seek help. And have a
Right.
check. So if it's very heavy, painful, if it becomes longer than 45 days, 2 months on a repeated basis, then it needs to be evaluated. And then based on what is causing it, we can say what you need to do. Because sometimes,
Right.
especially artists, whether they're dancers or musicians, when they have a physical problem that for which they need a hysterectomy, like or a uterus removal because they have very large fibroids, they hesitate a lot because they are worried about surgery. And
Yeah.
if they are busy artists, then they're trying to
And
fit this
time it
into their
takes.
schedules. And nowadays there isn't just one season. No, if it's not season here, it's season in America or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Australia. So it's
Correct.
they never
And now
find
it's
the
digital
windows.
season.
So it's 24/7. So there is no
Right.
uh, there's no window, but
Right.
it's sometimes important, and they may actually find that it is far more uh, that it's much better for them after the surgery if they genuinely needed it. So
Needed
that
it.
is
Okay.
also something too. Yeah.
Right. Doctor, I want to ask you about the role of nutrition across these different phases. Like, uh, how would you, what is the kind of nutrition across these phases of womanhood? Like you talked about protein and you talked about supplements and stuff, but like, would you advise different, women at different stages in their, ages, like different types of nutrition depending on the particular phase that they are in? So, for example, if it's like they headed to menopause, then would it be different, or childbirth would be different? So,
Yeah, so menopause certainly some definitely you need to look at what you're eating because your metabolism is slowing, changing. You can't handle the same amount of food I mean I can't handle the same amount of food I handled 10 years ago. So
right,
you need to be conscious. You need
conscious.
and we have a very high tendency to diabetes in our country. So you need to be careful about that. So the amount of carbohydrate definitely can come down. The amount of protein and calcium needs to go up.
Wow.
And yeah, pregnancy, the only thing is
Right,
that we need to uh, eat right. You don't have to eat for two. More importantly, in the postpartum period, it's very important to hydrate well, to have enough protein, because traditional diets are good, but some of them are very low in protein and some are very high in calorie. I say this in many forums that one killer laddu that they give uh, North Indians give. I mean, that's like, I think each laddu will be like 1,000 calories. And we all know what it takes to work that off.
for
So
you, really.
it's, yeah, so you have to be careful. There's somebody who
Right.
has repeatedly asked
Yeah, ask
Akila
this question
about
about, yeah,
vaccination. I know it's
yeah,
not related to this
not
topic,
related to this, but yeah,
but
please.
I'll answer it because she's asked
Sure.
twice. So
Yeah.
during the pandemic, vaccinations are delayed, and you don't have to worry about it. Just check with your pediatrician. A lot of them have started giving vaccines now, so I think you just need to get in touch with your pediatrician and have that sorted. But a little bit of a delay by a few weeks is not an issue.
Doctor, I'm going to ask you about stress, like the role of stress, and also the dance world is it's a tough world. So, there is, and especially now, there's so much uncertainty, anxiety, stress across these different phases. And what is the impact? Uh, how does stress affect overall hormonal health in that sense?
Yeah, so stress is a significant, can have a significant impact on the hormonal cycle. It can make it irregular. It can, so if someone already has a tendency for irregular periods, stress can worsen it. Uh, and therefore we have, I mean, it's, but unfortunately most of the time it's not just going to go away by wishing it away. Especially in this situation, it's quite a long drawn thing, no?
Yeah. Well,
As
yeah.
someone told me, we thought it will be a sprint, but it's turning to be a marathon. So we
Marathon.
have to
Sure.
sustain.
With no
We have
end
to,
in sight. Yeah.
yeah, I was telling, yeah, actually, maybe we should say it's turning into an ultra marathon now. So we have to make our mental shifts and gear ourselves to the fact that certain things are not going to be the way we planned it. Also, because I think not just artists, a lot of people I see, and I know we are affected also financially by it. It's not just
Absolutely.
yeah, it's not just the
Yeah.
ability to whether am I going to be able to perform. And for a performing artist, I mean, you need that interaction. I've asked a lot of artists myself, how do
Yeah.
you how do you do this? You know, you because interacting with the audience is so important. Yes, on
Such
a
a
digital
crucial thing,
format,
right?
you're able to do something, but it's not the same as performing.
Right.
And even classes, even for people who are teaching, they need not be actually,
Yeah.
they may not be performing very much, but they are not.
Correct.
The whole engagement in a class has changed.
It's
So all this
shifted.
is stressful. It can certainly affect the cycle pattern, but as I said, with other things, it's a mind game. So we have to adapt and
Yeah.
ourselves to accept it.
Right. Doctor, this word self-care, before we take those questions, this
Yeah.
word self-care, everybody's talking so much about it. Would you, reiterate the importance of self-care, especially at this time? You know?
Yeah. So self-care, I think, is both physical and mental and emotional. So it's all
Yeah.
three. So we need to
Yeah.
take care of ourselves physically, and in the context of dancers, I'm sure Lord they all do that because it's important for them.
Right.
But
Right.
emotionally and mentally, I think it is necessary to keep yourself in a good space, and that you can do in by whether it is meditation or whether it is yoga or it's communication with emotionally keeping the bonding and having
Yeah.
a good support circle with
Circle.
you,
Right.
and reaching out if
Um,
it is getting overwhelming. And that is important, to
yeah,
reach
that's an
out if it
important
gets
thing, right?
overwhelming, to know
Yeah.
when it is not okay. And I guess friends and family need to watch out for that if you think somebody
Right.
is not okay, if you think you have a friend or a co-artist or a co-dancer who you feel is not okay, then you can reach out on their behalf. I think we need
Correct.
to look out for
Have
our
that.
friends and other people just
Right.
as much as we are
Have a
looking out
support
for
group. Yeah.
ourselves. Yeah.
Right. Dr. Priya Murli, she's here. She's asking us if, asking you if calcium supplements too much is not good, right?
So too much is not good. Yeah, you need at least about a gram of calcium additionally after menopause. So if you're going to have more than 1.5 grams, it's not necessary. But if in the context of the previous person who had asked about renal stones, so some kinds of calciums they should avoid, but certain other kinds of calcium you should take. So yeah, Priya, I think any calcium supplement is fine, but 1 gram you need additionally. So if you're off dairy, then you need to ensure that you get that calcium in other forms, whether it's broccoli, almonds, whatever else you're going to source your calcium from, and as a tablet.
Dr. Satvika Shankar says, Doctor, can you please talk about diastasis post-delivery?
Okay, very specific question. Okay, so diastasis is a condition where the ligament that holds your pubic bone together separates or gets stretched.
Oh.
It is not that common, but it can happen, and it is very much known. The first indication of it would be pain along the pelvic, the front, just where your pubic symphysis is. And typically, when you take a step up to climb stairs, you'll find pain. So it need not happen just post delivery, it can happen even during pregnancy. So you don't have, have to have a vaginal delivery to have diastasis. But certainly, if you have a very large baby or if you've had a very prolonged labor, you can have aggravate this diastasis condition. It can be extremely painful, and I can imagine that if you're a dancer and you get it, it can be very disabling. You just need to give time and for the ligament to heal, because it's a very strong ligament. But so when it is stretched, it takes time to heal. We advise like a pelvic band that goes through to hold the hip together, and some painkillers. It takes time, but it does heal.
Right. Doctor, there's a question from Aarti. Hi, Aarti. Is the recovery time after removing fibroids the same as post-delivery for a dancer?
Yeah, roughly the same in terms of time from recovery from the surgery, because the scar is very similar. So the scar, any scar on the lower abdomen, if whether it's a section or a hysterectomy, if it's an open surgery or removal of fibroids, if it is open, 6 weeks your scar will heal. Actually, the recovery after removing fibroids will be faster than post-delivery, because you are not also then dealing with all the changes of motherhood and dealing with it. So the recovery from a hysterectomy, in my opinion, or fibroid removal is faster. If you have it laparoscopically, of course, it's that much faster. Even in a couple of weeks, you'll be up and about.
Right. Dr. Priya Mudle has another question about glucosamine tablets that we take for knee pain.
So it's good to at least chat with Priya virtually. Priya was my senior in school. We were in the same house. So we go back to school days. Yeah. So,
lovely.
So glucosamine tablets, so these are helpful for ligament strain and knee pain, but again, can't be taken continuously. Yeah, it's taken for a specific period of time, and parallelly you'll need to do whatever else is necessary to strengthen the muscles and the ligaments around the knee, because I can imagine that there is a lot of strain on the knee
while you
with
dance,
prolonged dancing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Doctor, there's a question from Veena Balasubramaniam about pessary changing. 3 months is what is recommended, and she says I haven't changed it in 4 months, and is that okay because of the pandemic?
Yeah. So the a pessary, yes, typically gets changed in 3 months. We are tending to push it to 3.5, 4 months now, because but given that the pandemic is actually still ongoing and it will take another month, it may be actually a good idea to go in and have it changed if it's crossed 4 months. Unless you're absolutely having no trouble with it, it's okay. But I wouldn't push it for longer than 4.5 months.
Right. Okay. Doctor, there was another question from a dancer on can irregularity in period be caused by dancing? Sometimes dancing does take a toll on the body, especially when you're dancing for long hours.
Yeah. So this is the same. You have to think about it in the same fashion as you think about athletes. So you have people who exercise, and you have people who exercise for competitive, international level competitive sport. So if you are doing that level of training, be it a very, very high intense, prolonged exercise, it can lower your estrogen levels in the body, and actually it can cause a delay in your periods, what we call amenorrhea, and you can go without periods for a fairly long period of time. So if you have, if you're, back-to-back shows, very strenuous exercise for months, yes, it can negatively impact.
Right. Doctor, I wanted to ask you about the role of sleep. I know that a lot of dancers have been writing to us actually saying that, through this period, I myself been struggling with sleep. And what would you say is the role of sleep in good health? Actually, in today's context, people are like writing books on sleep, and some my trainers often tell me that if you didn't have a good night's sleep, it's all right to skip exercise because the benefits that you get out of a good night's sleep sometimes overpower like what you'd get out of strength training. What is your comment on that, doctor?
Yeah, no, sleep is very important. I mean, I guess as obstetricians, we abuse sleep the most, but
I know.
sleep is very important, and because it gives a lot of. So, again, yeah, for adolescents in their early teens, sleep is very important because that's when a lot of the brain hormonal activity goes on. And
Right.
unfortunately for us, a lot of at that time we are pushing these kids to study a lot of them don't sleep at all, so that's
Right.
not a good thing. Again, so but that apart, even later on in life, a lot of your internal clock gets reset with sleep, and so good night's sleep, 8 hours, is actually a very good, very necessary. For otherwise, you will wake up with a hangover kind of feeling, very low energy, and so there needs to be good habits developed to ensure that you sleep right. If people are having difficulty sleeping, and that can happen especially when you're going through stress. So some of the simple things to do is to eat early, to try and unwind so that your brain is not like overactive. So
Overactive. Yeah.
whether it's just doing deep breathing or whatever that it takes to help to go off screens.
I know.
Maybe that's something you should do too, Akila. Go off screens, pick up an old-fashioned book.
Book.
Don't go, because the visual stimulation of the screen on your retina will actually worsen, keep you awake. So those are little things that
One must keep in mind.
one
Yeah.
should
Yeah.
keep in mind. Yeah.
Doctor, there was a question about does intermittent fasting have an impact on the menstrual cycle?
Uh, Intermittent fasting have an impact on the menstrual cycle? Per se, I don't think so. Per se, I don't think so. But if you're doing intermittent fasting over a prolonged period of time, then it could have some impact on the hormonal cycle. The way it can impact is if it actually manages to achieve weight loss. So, if you have done intermittent fasting to lose weight and that weight loss has happened, then that could have an impact on the menstrual cycle, which will actually be positive. So, other than that, I am not aware of any direct impact of intermittent fasting on the cycle.
Okay. Okay, doctor, there's a question from Chitra Arvind. Is it true that teenagers have a different biological clock with regard to sleep?
So they need more sleep because that's when, especially around puberty, because that's when the growth hormone gets released. That's what increases the growth spurt and the height gained. So it's very important that they get their sleep there. Is the biological clock different? Per se, I don't think so. Of course, with teenagers now, we think they do because they are up most of the night and they're sleeping in
Yeah.
the day. I don't know if that has triggered her question, but I don't know if that is a true reason for it.
Right. Doctor, before we have a few more questions, and I think we probably just have very little time, I just
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, Doctor, in today's context, we have like overdose of information, right? I mean, right from Instagram to like Google to everybody's asking so many questions like medical, I mean, if you're sick, you're just turning to Google and asking Google. What would you, I mean, how are doctors dealing with this pandemic of sorts where people are like, they come and tell you, no, I read somewhere that this is what is, how does one, and what would you advise, would you advise people to scan through it more deliberately, or would you advise them not to kind of research and read up on the internet, because it's really overwhelming sometimes, like.
Yeah. So I think so. There is a lot of information out there, and some of that information is very good. Some of the information is not necessarily accurate. more importantly, the information is there, but does the person who's reading it have enough knowledge and nuance to understand whether, even if it is accurate information, is that information applicable to me? Okay, so for example, if you say I have white discharge and you Google, it will take you to cervical cancer. But every woman who has white discharge doesn't have cervical cancer. Okay, so I think for simple, it's not important. I don't think Google should be your default option unless you have the maturity and the ability to discriminate a good site of source of information plus its relevance to you. And otherwise, it's like, a first year medical student, when or third year medical student, when we start doing clinical medicine, we think we have everything, every single disease that we're learning about, because every symptom you can kind of assume you have.
Resonates with you.
Yeah. So more importantly, I think it's important that you pick your doctor or the person that you're going to for healthcare advice after doing some degree of due diligence, and then accept and trust to a large extent what they're doing and what they're saying. So do the verification or the due diligence before you go, and then don't keep on second guessing the advice that is given. But having said that, if it is a significant decision or a important, crucial issue that is there, then certainly it is worthwhile ensuring that you have all options have been discussed with you. So there's nothing wrong in asking, is this option relevant? But what is not, what is sometimes difficult to deal with is if someone comes up with a having decided that this is the treatment option that I want, and that treatment option is actually not relevant or safe or practical for that particular person, then they tend to say, oh, that doctor didn't think that I could have it. There is a reason why a person cannot have a certain treatment option. Then that is a medical decision and a judgment call that you have to accept the doctor will make for you. So as long as the option is being discussed, it's fine. So I think too much Googling is a bad thing because it makes you believe you have conditions that you don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you talked about that certain discernment with which you read and being able to understand that is this applicable to me. Doctor, thank you so much for such a insightful, conversation. And we learned so much, and thank you for taking time off to, so generously share these things with us. I'm sure those who watched really enjoyed it. This video will be up on our IGTV on our Instagram page as well, and we will also share it on our YouTube channel, and then I'll send you a link. Thank you again, Doctor. And
thanks. Thank you, Akila. And I was very happy to see a lot of familiar faces here. And Rekha is there. Very nice to see Suman, Tulsi. Quite a few people have logged on. My cousin Kanaka. Many have logged on.
Kalpana. Yeah.
So
Satvika Shankar said you're her favorite doctor. So there are many people who also told us you're their favorite doctor. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you very much. And hi, Harni. Thank you for the opportunity. And so there are a lot of foodies also here, I think, as well.
That's right.
So hopefully we all... So I think you did ask a question about, what to do to keep yourself, positive during this time of pandemic. I truly believe that you should have good friends who will stand by you, whatever.
Absolutely.
And many of them have signed into this Instagram talk as well. So thank you very much.
So sweet.
And I think that's what makes the difference finally.
Absolutely. And women supporting women, Doctor, that's the best thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Thank you. So have a great make a good set of girlfriends and stay positive, everyone. See you all soon. Good night.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Akila. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.